Julia Rock, and she's dealing with the issue that I think is important to Black people, especially Black people in New York. Julia Rock is a reporter for the Daily Poster. And last week, Rebecca, you'll recall, we spoke with Jabari Brisport, and he was talking about the Medicare, the single payer system that they're trying to get in New York. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. Your recent
Good
reporting
morning, Julia.
Good
at
morning, Julia.
the Daily Poster, you're telling us about a backroom deal to kill single payer. But this is not a backroom deal being committed by Republicans. This is a backroom deal being put together by some Democrats to block this legislation that will help people get insurance, because we need some insurance out here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So this was, as you had said, a bill to pass single payer in New York State. And it's a bill that's passed the state assembly, I think, 5 times over the past decade. And in 2019, when New York Democrats took back the state Senate, I think it was kind of expected that this bill would be able to pass the legislature, and it hasn't passed the Assembly or the Senate since then. And now Democrats have supermajorities in the state Senate and the state Assembly. And when the legislative session ended last Thursday, the bill had not passed either. Additionally, the bill had co-sponsorship from enough people to pass both the Assembly and the Senate. And what I kind of learned in the course of the reporting is a huge part of the reason why this bill did not come to a vote, despite having enough votes to pass, was that some of the big public sector unions in New York State were opposing the legislation and pressuring Democratic leadership in the state not to pass the bill. So the session came to a close last Thursday. The single payer bill didn't even come up for a vote. And that's the second time that a state with Democratic supermajorities has had the opportunity to pass a single payer bill and not done so. The other example was California in 2017.
Just recent, I was just thinking about the fact that California pulled the same thing. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
Why do you think Democrats are afraid of jumping on this particular bill, the single payer bill? You would think that this would be something that is democratic, right? Progressive, right? Moving forward on helping everybody. And what we wanted is for them to have full control, and they have control. And it seems that they are at the forefront of blocking this blessing for the people of New York. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty sad because, obviously the goal is to win these elections and then be able to pass the progressive legislation that people ran on. I think New York is an example where there's a lot of power concentrated, at the top in leadership, and kind of in past years with Cuomo, although this year maybe he didn't quite have the power to be blocking things he didn't want done. And, if you talked to Jabari Brisport last week, that there was a really impressive organizing campaign behind this legislation. I do think that, and, this is what I was hearing from folks in New York, the opposition from the unions was incredibly challenging because they form such an important constituency for the Democrats in New York State. And the statements from union leadership, it was the United Federation of Teachers and then some of the other public municipal employee unions, was basically, we've sacrificed wage increases to bargain for healthcare in the past. And, we made that sacrifice, so we don't kind of want to lose that work that's been done. The argument doesn't really make any sense because the single payer bill would offer them pretty similar benefits to what they're getting right now. And it's, they're kind of throwing all of the other people who don't have great healthcare from their unions under the bus. So that was pretty sad to see as well. But I think that when, one of the big constituencies, in addition to all of the opposition from the healthcare industry that is notoriously really powerful, are coming out, against a bill, it's hard to overcome that with any amount of, good organizing.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that these leaders, I think this is bad faith, right? Now, I hear the argument from the teachers union that they've, and I don't agree with their argument, but at least they have an argument that they worked hard for the benefits that they currently have, and they sacrifice wage increases. That's an argument. It doesn't hold weight because now you don't have to negotiate for health care. You could take that completely outside of the equation. You can get more benefits. I mean, you can get more salary because now you don't have to focus on negotiating for your healthcare benefits. It's an argument, but it's not an argument. It's one that I don't agree with. On the other side, these elected politicians who have the responsibility of looking on behalf or representing all of the people, not just one particular group of constituents, not just the teachers union, right? They know better. They know that these politicians know that Medicare for all is a net plus for teachers, it's a net plus for Black people, it's a net plus for all marginalized communities. So why are these politicians? It's the same question Rebecca asked, I guess just from a different angle. Why are they not actively pushing this, let alone making backroom deals to block it?
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer besides that. I think this is what we've been seeing from, leadership in the New York State legislature for a long time. I think, if they wanted single payer to pass, it would be pretty easy. They have the votes. They're kind of the ones who are actively going against what the majority of legislators in their own party want. So I think it's some combination of one, this is legislation they actually don't want to pass. They're not true progressives, and I'm not sure would even really claim to be. And then I think also aren't kind of courageous enough to stand up to an industry that is really powerful, the health insurance industry, do something that's really going to piss them off and maybe set a precedent, for single payer legislation to pass in other states.
Do you think that this specifically will affect people of a certain race when it comes to this this particular legislation, especially in New York, where is it a thing where majority of the minorities there can't have access to healthcare, and this might affect them even worse than the others?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the exact statistics on it, but I think there are kind of two factors at play here. The first is that, one massive impact of the pandemic was that the unemployment rates between Black people and other people of color and the white employment rates, there were massive disparities between those, and a lot of people get their healthcare from their employers. So there was kind of a disproportionate impact of people losing their healthcare in those racial disparities in the unemployment rates. And then I think the other factor, and this is something the organizers working on the New York Health Act talked about a lot, is that there just are massive disparities in who is insured in New York and who isn't. And again, those fall along racial lines. White people are more likely to have health insurance than Black people and Latino people and other people of color.
Rebecca, we talk about this all the time. We talk about your experiences with the healthcare industry, my experiences with the healthcare industry, or whatever, however we want to describe them. We talk about the fact that there is a disproportionate, a disparate rather, treatment between Black people in the healthcare systems. And then if we look at COVID-19, we see essential workers who may or may not have had coverage during the pandemic. We see there's a number of people who died because they did not have coverage during the pandemic. That number of people, they were disproportionately Black. And then just all the way down the line, we see this happening across the country, disproportionately affecting Black people. Julia, one of the things I would like to know from you, and Rebecca, actually your insight on this as well, is how do we change this narrative of, because there's a big financial push against us getting single payer healthcare system, getting something like Medicare for all. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that is fighting against us. How do we break through on that narrative? Because a lot of times when we talk about Medicare for all, automatically people think, oh, Bernie bros. But truth is Black folks need this too, Rebecca and Julia, from your perspective, like, how do we change that narrative?
What narrative exactly?
The narrative that a single payer system is somehow not progressive,
Yeah.
not beneficial to Black people, not beneficial to marginalized groups, not beneficial to women, hell, not even beneficial to teachers, because that's part of your reporting is out there like they're downplaying this because they think it's not that they don't think it's critical, but it's a critical element for survival. We got to be able to see our doctors, especially during a pandemic.
Yeah, no, and I think COVID did really kind of lay that bare in a lot of the disparities we were seeing both in infections and in deaths between white folks and other racial groups. I think that kind of as you pointed out earlier in this call, it's important to realize that the people opposing this legislation are just acting in bad faith and kind of not take what they're saying at face value. I honestly think even the statements from the unions, I'm not really sure if they believe that there's some calculus to be made about having negotiated for past benefits and kind of therefore this would not be good for them. I think a lot of the arguments, against single payer are in bad faith. And, despite the fact that this bill didn't get a vote, there was a pretty impressive organizing push behind it kind of in the final days before the legislative session ended. The organizers staged like die-ins at the State House. There were massive canvassing campaigns. And so I think that there really, is no substitute for that kind of organizing and kind of teaching people about how this type of legislation will help them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Julia. I mean, mobilizing around and getting people to understand exactly what this bill or what this legislation entails, and keeping them up on how it could benefit them, and just for them to continue to help push it as well. The more that we educate people and get them to understand how this will benefit them, and how it doesn't benefit them, and who's fighting against it, and how they can fight, because there's so many different ways to fight, right? If we educate people on it, they can use their platforms, whether on social media, whether when people are out mobilizing in the streets, to spread the message on what's going on. I think all of these things assist in pushing us a step further, changing the narrative, first of all, pushing us a step further, into getting something at such as, like you said, Ben, Medicaid for all, single payer, something like that for everyone. And particularly, I think they what happens is they don't want the minorities really to understand what's going on. They just don't want that information to get to them so that they can go ahead and pass this by. And usually minorities in places where none of that information gets to, they just think that's an okay living. Like this is what it's supposed to be, not knowing that there is something out there that could possibly be on the table, but it's being blocked and fought against. And here's how you can get the word out. And here's how we can mobilize and challenge our leaders to help us get this put in place. So I think that's just another way that we could do that.
Absolutely. Agree. Absolutely. They can't afford to let working people actually have the freedom of healthcare. They can't, because they won't be able to keep us at these raggedy jobs they have us at. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
At all. Sorry. At all. No. Well, thank you so much, Julia. Let the people know where they can find you, and know more about the things that you're doing as well.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so our reporting is at dailyposter.com, and it'd be great if you'd check it out. And then we're also on Twitter at Daily Poster.
Okay, definitely. You guys follow the Daily Poster and follow Julia. Is that is it JUL1A Rock? That's you on Twitter, right?
Julia Rock, yeah.
Okay. So that's your Twitter up on there, because I was on your Twitter earlier today, and I see that you're fighting the same fight with us when it comes to calling out the Joe Biden and his administration on things that they aren't doing well, things that they've promised that they haven't come through with. So I see that we're all in this fight together. So make sure you give her a follow on Twitter and the Daily Poster as well. Thanks again for joining Like It or Not this morning. You enjoy the rest of your day, Julia.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.